Join me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. With the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. There's a part of the Buddhist story, his life story, which Alex will be telling this Wednesday night, so I guess this is a plug to come Wednesday night. And if you don't know the life story of the Buddha, Alex, who many of you, some of you may know, has been around Dharma Bum since 2007, really since 3 months after we opened, and he led classes on and off for the last 15 plus years. But he tells a great story of the life of the Buddha. So Wednesday night, he's going to come and do that. But that wasn't even why I brought it up. But in the story of the life of the Buddha, there's a piece to it where when the Buddha was a child, Siddhartha, when he was a child, he was out playing with some friends. And there's probably 1,000 variations of this story. But the general idea is that they were shooting like slingshot style stones, pebbles, rocks at birds. 10-year-old kids, to them having fun, goofing around. And all of a sudden they hit one of the birds and the bird fell to the ground. And they say that in this part of the story that it was at that moment that when Siddhartha, as a young child, saw the bird on the ground suffering, the compassion that he felt for this bird was just overwhelming. And it said when I'll let Alex tell the story, but it said that when he was born, he had this great sense of compassion or he would also become a great king, one or the other. So this was why they didn't want him to cease pain and suffering, because of the endless compassion that he embodied. So he sees this compassion, he sees this suffering, and he just begins to cultivate a sense of deep, deep compassion for pain. And the reason I bring this up is I think on this journey, we talk a lot about compassion towards self and compassion towards others. Right? Anytime I talk about compassion towards others, I will always throw in there, please don't ignore yourself, because you are important and you must love and care for yourself as well. But at this moment in time, I'm not talking about that. So, but you'll hear that at other times, right? At this moment in time, I'm talking about looking at when we see pain and suffering in the world, whether it's on a large global scale, whether it's walking across the street and you see a stranger, whether it's a loved one, a family, a friend, whoever it may be, when you see suffering, don't ignore it. This is such a deep part of Buddhist practice. And to me, it stems from this original kind of example of the Buddha as a child, who's known for having this, the Buddha himself, known for having this endless compassion towards others, towards all sentient beings. So when you see suffering, and you know suffering is there, don't ignore it. Of course, you can apply this to yourself as well, but again, I'm not talking about that right now. But don't ignore your own suffering either. Have compassion for yourself. But when you see it, figure out how and in what way can you aid to decrease the suffering of others. Don't ignore it. Ignoring it is easy. When we ignore it, we just let other people take care of it. And we think, well, I'm such a mess, I have to take care of myself. And yes, I get it. No offense to anyone here who's not a mess, but yes, I'm pretty comfortable saying we are all a mess. And so we have to take care of ourselves. But a big part of the Bodhisattva path and this Buddhist practice is in the practice of helping taking care of others, you develop this endless sense of compassion that then you know how to take care of yourself as well. So actually, by caring for others, by helping others, by seeing suffering in others, you're actually learning what it's like to have compassion. Most people I know throughout this journey have a harder time having compassion for themselves. I get it, right? Not everybody, but a lot of people. So have compassion for others. And when you see their pain, when you see their suffering, it really is a tremendous privilege to be able to just ignore it, first of all. And then to begin to understand that you don't have to be okay to help others. But when we ignore it, what in many ways we're saying is it makes us uncomfortable to see others in pain. I hear so often people talk about they just can't do much because they can't handle seeing people suffering. Well, this practice isn't avoidance. This practice isn't running away from. This practice isn't hiding. This practice is actually figuring out, how do I put myself in situations that actually make me uncomfortable? Safety, first and foremost, of course. But how and where can I put myself in situations that, yes, will cause me to feel discomfort, to feel angst, to feel suffering, to feel dukkha, as the Buddha called it, and then make a difference? Because there's so many people out there who need your help. In every way, shape, or form. People need your help. Sentient beings, animals, all need your help. So see the pain, see the suffering. It will move you. If you showed up here on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, I'm convinced every single one of you, when you see suffering, it will move you. Right? There's something on our own spiritual journeys that if you've reached a point where this stuff is of interest to you and you're exploring your own heart and your own mind, that when you see suffering, it will move you. Don't be afraid of that, is my suggestion. Embrace it. Sit with it. Figure out how can I care for it. Because it will bring you so much clarity around your own sense of identity of self, your own spiritual journey, whatever you want to call it. And there's so many little ways to help. Often people find themselves in situations where they see tremendous pain and suffering, and it comes up in questions here all the time, like, I don't know what to do, it's so overwhelming, there's so much going on in the world today. My response always is, yes, there's so much going on in the world today, and there's always been so much going on in the world yesterday, and endless time past, and endless time future. But you don't have to go save the world, right? Anyone seen the George Carlin skit on saving the planet? Really? Nobody? One? Okay, thank you. I don't feel so bad. One person and two people. All right. My ego feels better now, right? But just Google George Carlin Save the Planet. There's little things you can do to make a difference without feeling like you're having to, save the world, save the planet, right? Now I just want to go into George Carlin's skit, but I won't do it. Save the whale, save the bees. I'll stop. Take care of people in any way you can, and you will feel better. I learned that from day one with this practice in 2003. My master said, go into pride. I'd been there at the temple 3 weeks. She said, go to prison. And she said, she knew me real well. She said, go to prison. But she said, go help people. We need someone. And so 3 weeks into my Buddhist practice, that's where I went. And it changed my life forever. It actually deepened this part of my practice because it allowed me to see what compassion for others actually was. And it can be painful, as I already mentioned. If you feel pain, that's okay. If it hurts, that's okay. If you don't feel pain and it doesn't hurt, then we're just ignoring and kind of closing our eyes, so to speak, to what's going on in the world. So find ways to help other people. They need you. So, all right, so with that, we're going to start with a meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for saying hi to Jack and Benton and Joe and Ryan and all our other millions of followers out there. or 12, either way is good. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Same thing, a bench or chair, however you're seated. Trying to settle into a position that's comfortable. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means you need to move. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything from this practice. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from your practice, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize, however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is very often filled with chaos, conflict, difficulty, challenges. So this practice is learning to be okay with life as it arises, as opposed to running from life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it's a practice, and it requires the one thing that I know everyone in this room is so good at, which is having patience. So you will all be just fine. Be patient with yourself, be patient with others. Everyone's got their own mess that they're dealing with, just like you do. So, with that, I'll pause and just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time together for questions. And to those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Hi, Cynthia. It was funny to look down and see like this emoji. So if you have any questions, anybody online as well, feel free to put them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions.
So I was reading Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, and in one of the chapters he said something that just kind of confused me. It was a chapter about, I forget the title of it. He was basically, like, to sum it up, of course I think it's the right word, but he basically said people who are new to it get too excited and energetic about Buddhism. Maybe only practice Zen once a week. So should I just do this and like not think about it otherwise, or?
Well, I don't usually correct people with their questions, but I'm going to correct you just because you're talking about Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, and if I didn't correct you, I'd feel like I wouldn't be doing my job. I'm pretty sure every chapter confused you. Your comment was that one of the chapters confused you. If all of the chapters don't confuse you, then you're definitely not reading Zen Mind, Beginner Mind. So the piece about where Suzuki Roshi, Shunryu Suzuki, is talking about don't get too excited about Buddhism. For me, that's a really important teaching, a very common teaching that, in many ways, I mean, for me, that's my Zen Mind, Beginner Mind is like my Bible, to draw in a kind of parallel. And for me, what that means, and again, it doesn't mean I understand what he's talking about either. It just means this is what it means to me, is that people who are relatively new to Buddhism, and by new, I mean like, maybe you're 10 years, 15 years in. That's new, truly. Often treat Buddhism as if it's like, coming home at 10 o'clock at night and you're super hungry and you open up the fridge and there's like everything you could ever imagine eating. You got pizza, you got ice cream cake, you got pecan pie. Did I say cheesecake? No, you got cheesecake, you got chocolate mint brownies, you got crescent cookies. I'm just running through the list of what high school was like for me coming home to my parents' fridge from everything my mom baked, right? That was like the greatest thing in the world. And you get so excited about it. But Buddhism is not that. It's not a thing to get excited about. It's just everyday life. Now, do you get excited about everyday life is the question, not to answer right now. And so for me, what he's talking about is everything in life, every moment, you should be excited about it. The mistake people make is they think, well, my life, I was going to say sucks, and I don't want to draw to that, but my life is rough, my life is so hard, I'm challenged, I'm struggling, everything's so painful. But Buddhism is so exciting. All Buddhism is an opportunity to reflect on your own life. So that teaching to me says, make your life, every moment, exciting. And by making your life exciting, I'm not talking about going on crazy trips all over the world every day. I mean, you could do that too. But treat every moment like it's a crazy trip around the world. For me as a practitioner, I get excited every single day with every single thing I do. That's the practice. Whether you love it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, whether you want to do it or not, bring excitement into everything. But even going back to the way your question was, where he talks about doing zazen just, once a week, right? So then your idea is like, well, do I only need to come here and sit and do meditation once a week? No, you need it every day. But one thinks they need it every day. Don't do it because you think you need it. Do it simply to do it. And beginner's mind would tell you that when you're sitting today, it's as if you've never sat before. So the concept of time, am I sitting once a week, twice a week, 10 times a week, 30 days a week, all falls away. You're sitting in this moment. Yeah. I'm only trying to add to your confusion. How do you like the book so far?
I'm on my second read-through.
Yeah.
I gotta just keep reading this one for the rest of
That's my advice, is to read that book every year for the rest of your life. Absolutely. Because every time you read it, you're in a different emotional state, mental state, different level of understanding of yourself. But ultimately, again, for those who aren't familiar with, Suzuki Roshi or Zen practice or Buddhism as a whole, it's not about learning about something outside of you. So many people come here thinking like, I want to learn about Buddhism. Buddhism in and of itself won't do anything for you. It's just something outside of you. All the Buddhist teachings are doing is simply creating a space and time and opportunity for you to have a mirror and reflect back on yourself. Learn about yourself. That's what Buddhism is trying to help you understand. So, yeah. What else?
So you said learn about yourself. When it comes to almost learning about your experiences and how they impacted you, what do you almost do with that information? You learn about yourself and how you learn to almost deal with it.
Yeah, so the question, if I'm hearing you correctly, just to repeat for those who maybe didn't hear it virtually, is that, so what you said roughly was that I'm talking about learning about yourself, and your question is, well, once you learn about yourself, what do you do with that information? Right? And how do you deal with it, right? When you said how do you deal with it, that made me think that you're referring to things about yourself that aren't so great.
Sure.
By saying, how do I deal with it? Because if there were things about yourself that were great, you wouldn't have to worry about dealing with it. Sure?
Yes.
So are there also things about yourself that you really love and aren't worried about dealing with?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. So focus on those more is the first part. That makes the part you're asking about that much easier. If we begin to get to know ourselves and all we do is pick out all the things about ourselves that need some work, which we all have endlessly, then that can be kind of depressing. Growing up as an angry, depressed, miserable kid, if all I focused on was anger, misery, and depression, then I just got more angry, more miserable, more depression. So it helped to begin to recognize, coming back to the part I opened with, having compassion and wisdom says, hey, let's also look at some of the things that we really feel positive about ourselves with. Right? There's a lot of wonderful things, I'm sure, about you. But you don't sit around all day and think about those things, do you? No. So first, reflect on those. Then, when you look at the things about you that maybe you don't love or you'd like to change or you're working through, first practice patience. And understand, another wonderful thing, right? I wish you could see the facial expressions, right? First practice patience. Because what it says is if I got a whole list of things over here that are wonderful that I've done in my life, and a whole bunch of stuff over here that are not so wonderful I've done in my life, we have to be patient with these things over here. Right? We're just human, but for some reason we put this bar and expectation on ourselves that we're supposed to be these pure, flawless, perfect beings. We're not. We're just a shit show. Constantly. Learn to be patient with that. Learn to laugh at that. Learn to find humor in it. So I'm not even telling you what to do with it yet. I'm more trying to help you prepare for how to look at it. Because if you can look at it with a gentler, kinder, more compassionate heart, then the part where you ask about, how do I deal with it? It doesn't seem so crushing and overwhelming. For me to look at the fact that I was an angry asshole was like, oh, okay, I am that. Or I am being that. That's not who I am, but that's who I'm being. That's how I am being. And I need to learn to be patient with myself and laugh and find humor in the fact that this anger and misery that I'm bringing into the world is ridiculous. But not hate myself for being that way. Find humor in it. Not humor in the pain you're causing, but humor in how just absurd it is. Humor in the fact that the stupidest little things would make me so angry. That for the most part were meaningless. There are definitely things in the world to be angry about. I get that. But majority of our days are not spent being triggered by these global things that are happening. So much of our days were triggered by the sound of the wind that we don't like. Or the latte that's not made properly, or our whatever that was prepared a little bit underdone. And the person's just bringing it to your table. You don't need to yell at them. They're fine. So focus on how silly it is, the things that bother us so much. And then, when you do eventually change your approach to seeing the silliness of these things that are going on, then look at it and say, okay, my suggestion would be, instead of saying, how do I deal with this? My suggestion would be to say, how do I work on this? How do I understand this better? How has this impacted my life? What is worth holding on to? And what is worth kind of setting down a little bit? Begin to see the anger, the resentments, the frustrations, the disappointments that you have, not only in yourself, but in everybody else. So much of the anger that we carry and misery that we carry is because we don't like what other people have done. They can't change that because it's in the past. But we'll spend the rest of our lives wishing that other people were certain ways. They're not going to be that way. Especially if it's in the past. It's done. So this is where we open up. We have compassion. We have empathy for those who are suffering. Right? And it helps. Right? We can see the pain and misery that others are bringing into the world. We don't have to like it and enjoy it, but it doesn't destroy us. And you can create barriers for yourself if need be to keep yourself safe. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I need space. I can't deal with this. But always just look at it. And there's a common expression in Buddhism that says just sit with it, which I agree, but just sitting with it, you have to then kind of, it's like, think of all the stuff that you're referring to that you have to deal with it. Think of them as presents. You ever get a beautifully wrapped present? What do you do with it? Open it. And you find out what? Whatever's inside. It's like, let's make a deal. Door number 1, 2, or 3. Some of them are good prizes and some of them, they're like zonks. But you got to deal with them with kindness and compassion. So, I don't say you got to. It's helpful to deal with kindness and compassion towards whatever's in that present. Yeah. And you'll probably get through it. So yeah, for sure. What else? Yeah.
One of the paramitas, I think it's translated mental stabilization. How does one practice mental stabilization from this perspective?
Yeah. So for me, and as you know, everybody's going to be trained differently, but mental stabilization, present time awareness, single-minded focus. I will always reference Dogen's teachings around this, where the great Zen master, he lived from 1200 to 1253. He's the founder of what's called the Soto Zen school of Buddhism, which Suzuki Roshi, Shunryu Suzuki is in the lineage of, where Dogen would talk about where the mind and body fall away, and all you're left with sensation of breath. left with a sensation of breath. So to me, that intense level of concentration and focus of training the mind begins with just sitting, bringing the mind to a single point on a wall, on sensation of breath, on the counting, whatever technique you might use, to where there is no other thing. And this might sound as if you're kind of ignoring everything, but that's not what I'm getting at. When you bring it to this place, there is nothing else that exists. All that exists is your consciousness, one moment, and everything else falls away. So ultimately, there isn't even any mind to stabilize. There is no instability. So simple, right? I mean, just stare at a wall. I mean, that's the, Bodhidharma, they say he was so determined to awaken that he stared at a wall for 9 years. And the story is that it was so intense that you can go to the wall and there's holes burned in the wall from where you stared at for 9 years, So as long as you've got nothing to do for the next 9 years, you're good. If that's not a possibility, and you want to work and you want to eat and you want to, I guess, do other things, then continue to just train single-minded focus, use the breath, use a counting technique, use a spot on the wall, use a flower, use a candle. Incense sticks, I've always found is a wonderful a point of focus for meditation because it also reminds us of impermanence. And as the incense stick burns, it's like us. We've been lit, we're alive, and with every breath, we're one moment closer to becoming ash. So, just continue to practice training the mind on one point to where you go beyond thinking, is what Dogen called it. And there is no thought, there is no more mind, there's nothing to stabilize. There's just present moment. So that's how. Yes. And report back, because, I've always wanted to meet somebody who could do that. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
I am super sleepy
Oh.
all the time when I meditate, like almost always. And so I sit on the floor because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's
How do
great.
you not, I don't know, any tips, tricks?
Yeah, so the question around how to just keep from being sleepy when you're doing meditation, how to stay awake. So my first question is your personal practice here or at home or wherever, eyes open or closed?
Close.
Okay, abandon that. That's the first way. For me as a practitioner and in the Zen practice, your eyes are not closed. I don't know if you heard me talk about this, but your eyes are open during meditation. So, and you can all try this with me right now, especially if you've never done this, but everybody close your eyes, kind of like you're in a meditation posture, whatever you're in, and then slowly start to open them to where you're just looking about a foot or 2 feet in front of you, to wherever you're seated. If you're in a chair, maybe you'll see the back of the chair in front of you, or maybe a foot or two down up in the ground in front of you. And so start to open them where you just have a soft gaze about a foot to 2 feet in front of you, and hold your attention there. Not at your nose, you'll get dizzy, but past your nose on the ground. And you want to open them enough to where they don't feel like they're about to close, to where you're going to fall asleep, but they're open. To where if you look at me right now, my eyes are open, but it might look like my eyes are closed. That's where you want to hold your gaze. So I would suggest abandoning the eyes closed meditation practice for a while. I do love the fact that you're sitting on the floor and that makes you physically uncomfortable because, yes, physical pain within reason is a great way to stay awake. Discomfort is a great way to stay awake. But just start practicing an eyes open meditation. I mean, for me, I'm more biased definitely towards that anyways because we live our lives eyes open or eyes closed. Eyes open. And very often, especially for those who might be newer to meditation, there's this idea that I'm going to meditate, I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to go into my own little bubble world. When our eyes are closed, then we start to see things and like these tunnels and whatever you're looking at. And that's just like, it's almost like daydreaming or sleeping or kind of mind just in this crazy little tunnel world. Open your eyes. Ever seen the movie Vanilla Sky?
Yeah.
Yes. Abra los ojos. Open your eyes. Yeah, great movie. I mean, it's one of my all-time, as weird and twisted as that movie is, it's one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. But open your eyes with meditation. And it kind of ties into the earlier question about the concentration, is that the second part to that, which I would add, is that when your eyes are open and when you cultivate that intense level of concentration and focus in the present moment, you're not oblivious or ignoring what's going on. You're actually hearing, seeing, feeling everything that's going on. It just doesn't penetrate you to where it disturbs you. So the eyes open practice is really training you to engage in life. If we can develop this kind of intense level of concentration and focus in the present moment, but hear everything, feel everything, see everything, be aware of everything, but we're practicing sitting and doing nothing with all the stuff that's going on. Then when we get off the cushion or off our seat or out of our meditation, as we call it, we go into the world, we're more prepared to deal with the madness. Because we're just eyes open, transition into the world, eyes are still open. So it's more to me than just like the staying awake part. It's actually completely transforming your meditation practice into being awake to what's going on in the world. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
How would you suggest kind of beginning your practice and getting into the practice?
Oh, you've already begun, my friend. Yeah. I think whatever pace you're at, you've begun. I mean, give me your brief, how new is this all to you?
I've been going to temple with my parents and all that, just different types of temples.
Sure.
To hop around.
Yeah.
But never really stuck to anything.
Yeah. I think that, San Diego's a great place in that it has within a 10-mile radius, there's probably 50 Buddhist temples here. I'm not even kidding. And that's just within Buddhism, right? And there's so many other religions, spiritual practices, and ways of life that are all beautiful. So first and foremost, I think is, and I don't care where it is. I mean, I want people to go to other places. So wherever you practice, I think most important is find a place that you're comfortable at. Once you find a place that you're comfortable, kind of the jumping around is wonderful, but it also helps every so often to say, okay, I'm going to kind of commit to I'm not even talking about a place, but a way of practicing. And then you just, every day, you just do little things, whether you read a little bit, whether you meditate a little bit, whether you get involved in a community a little bit, you kind of just slowly, I'm never a fan of rushing and jumping into things, and very often people show up in 2 weeks in, they're like, okay, what do I do now? And I'm like, nothing. We can't take the same mind of the craziness and that's caused so much suffering in our lives into any sort of spiritual practice. Try to take a very slow, patient approach. You show up to meditation once a week, twice a week, you meditate, you read a little bit about Buddhist practice, you figure out how to bring it into your life. It's a lifelong journey. To think that you can do this stuff and in 3 years, all of a sudden, you're going to attain some enlightenment is crazy. Just go slow and try to be a little happier today than you were yesterday. A little more peaceful today than you were yesterday. A little less suffering today than you were yesterday. So you just kind of slowly find different places and people that you're comfortable sitting with. And then it's really just kind of a rinse and repeat type of thing. I always fall back to what Vicky said 10 years ago. She said, I've been listening to Jeff say the same thing for years. And I just come for the reminders. Because this stuff is not easy. We can read a beautiful Pema Chodron compassion book and then walk outside and start screaming at the person that cut us off. So it just takes time, practice. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for any specific kind of literature to get into?
Yeah, there's downstairs Buddha Free, we have a ton of kind of intro to Buddhism books that are really helpful. There's a library up there. You can pretty much close your eyes and grab anything off the shelf and it'll probably be beneficial. So I think that just starting there, you read something, you don't like it, read something else, you read something, you like it, stick with it. Just kind of start. Yeah, don't be afraid of starting wrong. Just kind of start. And like I said, you've already started. That intention, that genuine interest in actually getting yourself and those around you healthier and happier, you've already begun. So just continue to cultivate that. I'm really good at not answering questions, huh? That's what my teacher taught me. She said, don't when you ask questions, don't look for answers. She said, just shift your questions as you go, because what that means is you're learning about yourself and the path and the practice, and therefore your questions begin to shift. So, yeah. Don't ever rely on anyone else for anything to show you the way. You know, that's what the Buddha said. Be your own light unto yourself. Yeah. What else? We'll do one more, I think, question.
One of the things I'm working on is recontextualizing trauma, and I was actually wondering, when I try to do that, when I sit with it, there's the anger, there's the terror, there's all that. I was wondering, I mean, what's a good way to just acknowledge that there is trauma, there is pain, but also not spiral into that?
Yeah. So let me just sum that up in 2 minutes as we close. The question was around how to recontextualize trauma, and as you're working, that's what you're working on, and as you're working on that, your question, I believe, is around what's the best way to kind of see it, the trauma, and not let it, the anger, the experience, whatever it might be, and not let it spiral out of control. You know, the answer, the response to that is kind of in the question itself, where that's where I would always start, which you said you see it, right? And so I often talk about, I'll say this in general, therapy and Buddhist practice. Both are phenomenal, right? The thing I often say is half the people in here are in therapy, the other half of the people in this room are therapists, and half of the therapists are in therapy, right? Yeah. So there's a room filled here of people who are in therapy or therapists, and there's also a big difference between therapy and Buddhism. Both incredibly important. I never suggest you abandon one and pick up the other, right? This is not my push to stop therapy. Continue therapy, continue your meds, right? But there is a difference between the two. And in even following on my question around the training the mind, is that ultimately, and I'm not even suggesting this, but I want to say this anyways, ultimately, there is nothing to contextualize. Ultimately. We're not there. In Buddhism, they talk about ultimate reality, conventional reality. Ultimate reality says there's just experiences. There's no need to contextualize them. There's no need to give them any weight whatsoever. Breathing in, I have a thought. Breathing out, I have a thought. Breathing in, I remember an experience. Breathing out, I remember experience. Breathing in, my knee hurts. Breathing out, my knee hurts. Present time awareness, meditation practice, the Zen practice, isn't about figuring shit out. There's nothing to work through. Again, not therapy and not what I'm necessarily suggesting. I just want to point that out. That if all of a sudden you could sit and breathe without the idea of having to work. So even the way you asked your question, which again, I'm not suggesting is bad, but the way you asked the question is about, okay, I'm going to sit, I'm going to do a meditation practice, and I'm going to work on contextualizing trauma. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
What if you just sat for no reason other than just to sit? Would be nice, right? Okay, so balance that, trying that, with your work on contextualizing trauma. Now the question around how to contextualize, or how to not spin out of control, not to spiral, I still kind of default back to my first response, which is, okay, I'm sitting, and I can give, and I'm not, let me say this also, the trauma, the experiences are real. They've happened, and they're painful, and they can destroy us, absolutely. So I'm definitely not minimizing that at all. I spent 25 years working with people, starting probably 25 years ago, working with teenage, adolescent women who have been physically, sexually, emotionally abused and gone through tremendous trauma. And ever since then, working with active military, combat veterans, people in prison, men, women, and children who have gone through incredible, intense levels of trauma. And the practice to me always is the same, is to recognize the trauma, to learn your question around how do I not let it spiral out of control. It is a thought. There's the trauma. I can create stories around it. I can contextualize it. I can give it meaning. I can feel misery from it, or I can see it as something that happened and come back to my breath. Use the breath as an anchor. use a mala bead as an anchor, use a candle as an anchor, meaning these are tools you can use in a meditation practice when you have these thoughts to come back to present moment. Now, throughout our day, we're just going through our day and we're driving or walking or eating lunch and we're having bad thoughts and we're experiencing kind of these triggers. Focus on eating your sandwich. It's just driving attention away. Because all of our pain and suffering, as the Buddha taught, and to me, which is just common sense, all of our pain and suffering comes from one place and one place only. Where is that? Us, but specifically.
The world.
And yes, 2 for 2, but specifically where in you and where in the world you live in. All your pain is coming from one place and one place only, which is where?
The mind.
The mind. So training the mind, meditation in Buddhist teachings is about training the mind. It's not an escape. It's what so many people come to Buddhism for. Right? Kind of coming back to the excitement of Buddhism. This isn't an escape, folks. This is a waking up to your trauma. This is what happened to me. I don't have to carry that my whole life. I can come back to eating a sandwich and experience eating a sandwich. Because if I'm eating a sandwich and experiencing eating the sandwich, and I'm focused on eating the sandwich, and I'm thinking about eating the sandwich, what am I not thinking about? Trauma. And then in therapy, focus on the trauma. Again, I'm not saying you're in therapy, I'm just, I was for anybody else who might be in therapy. So I don't want to cut that off. But understand the big difference between the two. And how they correlate and work beautifully together.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. I'm just looking up one date here. Give me 1 second. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jeff. Hang on. All right, cool. I just wanted to get the right date on something. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm convinced that when I'm dead, I'll still be able to say that, right? Thanks all for being here. We opened up the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, nuns, gurus, masters, or teachers. We're just practitioners doing our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So every night we have different practices going on, different approaches to Buddhism. Every Thursday, 4:30, we have, I think, one of the best things around here. It's a food redistribution program. We prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you lack gratitude and you think your life is really rough, feed people who sleep on a sidewalk, and it tends to put things into perspective. So again, that's every Thursday, 4:30. A couple things out of the ordinary. As I mentioned, this coming Wednesday, we're actually starting a new Wednesday night program. It's kind of a guest speaker series where we'll have different events going on every Wednesday night. So just check the website schedule or the Facebook stuff or Instagram, whatever you follow, to know what's going on. And so this Wednesday, as I said, we'll start with Alex. He'll tell the life story of the Buddha. Again, if you've never heard it, it's a really fun, kind of cool story the way Alex tells it. And then Friday, October 25th at 4 o'clock. Some of you may or may not know Bob Lay. He was with San Diego Pride for many, many years. Still does a lot with San Diego Pride. We do a lot with San Diego Pride. Trans Family Support Services is looking for volunteers. I need to put together a volunteer crew of about 20 people. Friday the 25th at 4 o'clock. On Saturday, Trans Family Support Services is having an event for kids, kind of like a Halloween event. And so we're going to be helping them on Friday hang like the green screen that goes on fences. I was told it's easy work and all ages are welcome. So regardless of your age, you are welcome to attend. But Friday, 4 o'clock, we need a bunch of volunteers. So if anybody wants to help, that just went out in the newsletter. It'll go out on all the social media stuff, or you just let me know. But so I will be heavily pushing for 20 volunteers to help hang green screens on Friday, October 24th, I believe. Actually, I'm not sure. It'll be somewhere right here in Hillcrest. I don't know the exact location. Other than that, thanks for being here. Buddha for you is downstairs if you need anything. I wish you well, and we'll see you soon.